All right, we're just about ready to get started. All right, everybody, good afternoon. This is the Assembly Rules Committee. It's March 14th, 2024. It's 5, my phone is stuck on a different time zone. 1:03 p.m. The clock is not accurate either, so I can't win. We have a pretty robust agenda today, but before we get started, we'll call to order and do some introductions. We'll start here.
Karen Braga.
Scott Myers.
Daniel Volant.
Anna Brawley, and I'll just say happy Pi Day as well.
Christopher Constantine, I will say I was just at a different meeting and there was like 10 pies on the table. I had to run away. Go ahead. On the phone, we have Mr. Salt. You're there? Mr. Salt?
Yeah, I'm here. I was getting a call at the same time. Sorry.
No
Thanks.
problem. Thanks. And Mr. Johnson, are you here?
I'm here.
And Mr. Cross, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. One more sec, we'll get started. We'll go ahead and just review through the agenda, folks, see if there's anything that's missing. I'm looking up a piece of information I need real quick. Okay, so I would also note in the back, we have with us Mark Littlefield, who is the lone candidate on the ballot for Assembly District 2. And so de facto winner, and might as well start the conversation now with him as a new party, unless some write-in candidate manages to swoop in and, change things. So we figured to invite him into the conversation now, and I don't know why you have to sit out there. You can come on up. Yep, might as well. Oh, where there's a microphone over here is better. Transitions are always tricky, and so the more time folks have for transition, the better. And so welcome, Mr. Littlefield, Mark. And these committee meetings, we tend to be less formal unless things become spicier, and then we get more formal. And then our regular meetings tend to be formal. But for this, and generally I may accidentally default to last names, but first names are completely appropriate in these meetings. And so welcome. Now, I don't have a detailed report. We have reports. I'm going to go ahead and let the clerk and our legislative team start, and then I might do some conclusory comments, but we'll start with Claire.
Okay, for communications, Allie has been really busy supporting the communications for the elections and trying some new things with video. So hopefully go check out the clerk's social media pages and you can see some of the new videos she's creating. She's also doing a lot to support community engagement for the home initiative and has developed presentations and letters for a lot of you for different events that you've gone to speak about assembly priorities. Jennifer has been doing a lot of work with communications with the legislature and the congressional delegation. When you pass your resolutions, she makes sure that they get to the appropriate people and does any follow-up with them. We're also continuing to staff the alcohol tax strategic plan and the marijuana tax, childcare, and early education fund implementation. I'm working on a couple of projects. We got a contract for a sanitation survey put out. That was with using ARPA money, and Huddle got that contract, and so we hope to start with them very soon. We also put out a contract to develop pre-approved residential housing plans with members Cross and Zalatel, and we didn't get any bidders on that. So I'm talking to some design architects and developers to see what the problem was and see if we can reshape that and get that going. On the administration side, we are working with Member Volan to develop a pilot project with aid management. I know it's really hard for you to manage your aids and put them to the best use. So we're going to try a project where we kind of help share management and supervision and see how that goes. And if it works well, we could offer that service to the rest of you. Alongside of that, Jennifer is creating an assembly aid training with recorded videos that they can take at any time on their time. And so she'll be probably getting in touch with a lot of you, all of you, to ask for your input on what kinds of things you'd want your training for your aides, and then rolling that out. And then finally, all of the staff of the assembly branch have been meeting because we're feeling a little stretched thin. You all have so many different projects on so many topics, and we feel like with all of the new staff coming on and new roles, we're stepping on each other's toes a little bit, and sometimes working on the same project without knowing it. So we're just working on how we can better track things and better serve you and provide a smoother process. And then with that, maybe asking you to do some things when you send requests, maybe creating a more formal system for you submitting requests for your different projects, whether it be a communications, a presentation, a legal request, perhaps submitting it all through one thing and then having it go off to the person to work on it. But we're in the early stages of that. So we'll be telling you more as we go. And I believe that is all of the big things that we wanted to let you know about. And then we continue to do a lot of other routine work. Oh, and we get to do another assembly member orientation. I thought we were going to go a whole year without having to do that. But we're really excited to welcome you on board, Mr. Littlefield. And we'll be getting in touch soon to schedule out your orientation.
Thank you. And just a little riff on that. Staff limitations and respecting time. It's new. The department is new and growing, and everybody wants to help. And it's challenging because everybody has priorities ad hoc. They come up and things, burning fires and then little fires and then ongoing work. And so not only the process for engaging work being developed, but assembly members understanding the human limitations of the people we have and how to figure out what part you can take on in the work to make sure that it's a collaborative effort, not just a, hey, do this for me, because that's not really how it's going to work. And we don't have them in front of us today, but we have our annual work plan. And while it's not so hard to massage a project like Clay into something that fits within the plan, really the idea for our legislative services, their priority of time is those tasks that are clearly elucidated within the annual work plan, because then that gives them an opportunity to focus on the things that we're trying to achieve. And it puts some bounds, recognizing, of course, that things pop up and we have to be flexible. And so it's that two-way street of flexibility. I think Mr. Ballin and I had a chat about that this weekend, about how the more you do this work, the better you get at understanding the limitations of the tools we have, the people we work with, the time that's available. And sometimes it gets frustrating because we all as members want everything we want today because our problem is now, but it doesn't really work that way. And the better we get at that kind of communication process, the better we are at collectively achieving all of our separate and unified goals. So something about the leaning in on the process of identifying our annual plan and recognizing limitations and respect for time. It's pretty important. Ms. Brawley. Anna.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. And I really appreciate the work of the staff. I know I've been one of the guys, one of the people pulling on your time a lot, so I appreciate that. So I guess I can just offer a few tips and just remind folks other tools that we have. So we have the legislative templates. And so anytime that you're kind of drafting something, I would encourage, start with that. And then even if it's not the way that it's going to turn out, you can at least write down, here's what I want to say. And then somebody else can help you massage that. And that includes our council as well. And then also, I know a lot of the conversations that I've had with Allie in particular, for example, on the home initiative is really the timeline and when we expect things maybe to happen or when is realistic. So that's another good thing is if you are working on something that might have a longer time frame or maybe not, but it's going to come up at a certain time, just kind of sit down and talk through because that helps them with their workload, and then also again helps you kind of think about the strategy involved with all of that. So that's just a couple tips I can offer, and also know that I am the bottleneck, but I try to try to do my part. So thank you.
One of them. Miss Karen.
I just wanted to thank you for delineating the different jobs. That was a really good email. Just, I space on it sometimes, so I appreciate that. And if I could remember who said this, but just the other day I ran into someone that was like, oh my gosh, your staff is so fantastic. I can't believe all that's out there to educate the public. And she was going on and on about the newsletters. And anyway, I wanted to tell you that it was someone important too, but hell if I know who it was.
And on that subject, I just said to Allie walking in, Ann and I were in DC this week, and yesterday morning we made presentations to our delegation, and the director of communications for Senator Sullivan's office, whom I've known for many, many, many years, who is an inveterate professional and knows her stuff, just was blown away by the level of professionalism and the quality of our materials that we presented. Like, it was 100% recognized. Like, wow, it's quantum leap above where we've been and above what most people are able to deliver. And in fact, I think in Juneau, different story. So different story. I'll hold it there and just say that even in the halls of Congress, it was recognized this week that the materials we're developing are effective. And so on that note, it's true. So, okay, anyone else on this? Anything else on your report? All right, so go ahead, Madam Clerk, Jamie.
Thank you. So the election is in full swing. William has been tracking the mail data, and approximately 96% of Anchorage ballots have been delivered or are out to be delivered today. Training for election workers is ongoing by election staff, and the Anchorage Vote Centers open on March 25th. The drop boxes have also been opened. And then Matt, the new program and budget analyst, is on the phone. He's been on the job for nearly a month now, and he is full steam ahead, despite my little fires and big fires that have probably confused the heck out of him. But
That's the
we're
nature of the
getting
job.
there.
Anything else?
No.
So, Jamie and I were in discussions. You know, we've been working on a process to ensure that our branch staff are funded in a way that achieves parity with the administration if the positions are equal and the qualifications are equal. This has been an ongoing project for a long time. For many years, a staff member for the assembly doing the same work as someone for the mayor would be paid half as much, literally half as much, because of the way that the pay scales are set up and because of the way that our positions have been classified over time. And so there has been a concerted effort over the last few years to bring parity to our branch's pay in relationship to other executives doing equal and qualified work. And so there are a few more items of that project that will come to bear as we come around to first quarter budget revisions. It won't amount probably to a substantial increase to our budget, but it will be an increase to our budget. And so I wanted to prime folks for the conversation that it's possible you will see a modest increase proposed to the assembly branch budget to make sure some folks who are doing some work for us are getting paid fairly compared to other members doing similar work. And this comes to bear because we have, as you know, competition among the municipality for employees. And we have created in our teams a team of teams that is so professional, high performing. We just heard about the materials coming out of our legislative team, our clerk staff, that other departments are trying to headhunt our team because they're really good. And in some ways we can't afford to keep them because what they're able to offer just based on status quo developments over the years. And so we're doing our best to ensure that we build our team and are able to keep them and not lose them for someone going upstairs to do the same job but get paid $10 an hour more. And so it's hard to keep someone, it's easy to understand why they would go from a personal perspective if that kind of a difference would be available to them. So to that end, we're in discussions, we're doing analysis, and the conversation will probably come back around in the next 6 to 8 weeks that there is some correction still in order. So, and for my part then, after that, the chair's report, there have been, you'll see item on the agenda about talking about seating chart, committee rearrangements. We're closing out this term, the leadership year. There will be at the second meeting in April, a motion to reorganize. I'm hoping that we're able to keep things running smoothly as we go through this process. And as the clerk said, the election is now. There is an item that wasn't on the agenda. Daniel, did you have a chance to speak with council on your question?
No, just an email.
Did you guys have a chance to see Daniel's email this morning?
I think you guys could probably weigh in.
Yeah,
So-
they probably know.
Yeah,
so-
my question is, so there was an op-ed, I think it was on the bathroom bill, and it talked about how assembly members may not be able to openly support or explain bonds and props. So I just thought it might be nice to have a discussion about what can we do as a assembly member? Are we allowed to campaign for, promote, advocate for passage of the various bond propositions or like the chief medical officer item?
Well, I would just briefly say for the moment, I guess I should follow up in an email later on to all the members. But this relates to Code Section 115, 110, political activity. There's also some state election and campaign laws and APOC regulations that could be applicable depending on what you're talking about. So you use several words there, campaign, advocate, and so forth. Well, so campaigning is APOC regulated. As individual assembly members, I mean, you are politicians, you're probably expected to take positions on issues. So you can, of course, as an individual assembly member, vol and say, I support this bond or that, but you can't say that you speak for the assembly, and you cannot use municipal resources to do so. So you can write an op-ed from you at your computer and send that. That doesn't use municipal resources. But you can't have legislative services work out the whole position paper for you. I guess that's sort of my rough advice here at the moment. The danger of, I guess, on our own, trying to spend money for fundraising and so forth becomes an APOC issue. And you just want to be careful about that.
No, great, that matches my understanding.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what Dean's getting to there is by campaigning, depending on how you define it, if you're defining it as, I'm going to buy an ad, then you cross the line into other domains of people's regulatory sphere. You can, I believe, under the First Amendment, say whatever the heck you want about any of these items, and you can work as hard as you want on those items. It just, when you start to create materials and do that stuff, then you definitely have to ask yourself, and all of us have some experience with APOC, if this feels like it crosses one of those lines. And so feel free to advocate, champion, oppose anything that the assembly has put forward on the ballot, because that is your fundamental right, and your neighbors expect an answer from you. So, okay, Ms. Braga. Oh, good question. Ms. Braga, you had a question for Jamie.
Yeah, sure. Who should we start with?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You know, she just said, you didn't have a question, did you? Yeah, no, you said
okay.
good question. Yeah, so.
Okay, thanks. This is just about elections. So, because I know the voter registration deadline has passed. That was March 3rd. And then ballots, of course, got mailed to everybody who was registered. If, like, let's say somebody forgot that and they're a current resident, or let's say somebody moved here, you know, March 25th or what, you know, so we encounter somebody from the public. Is there any opportunity for them to vote in this election, and how does that work? Just so we're aware.
Ballots were mailed to all registered voters. If their ballot is returned to us undeliverable, so if a voter doesn't get their ballot for any reason, the Anchorage Vote Centers open on March 25th, and anybody can walk in and vote there. If they are not on the register, then just in normal proceedings, they would be able to vote a question ballot. And then we would review it once it got back to the election center and count what we can.
Okay, so basically if they're already registered but they don't have a ballot, they can vote in person, or I assume they can call the hotline as well and get a
And
replacement.
replacement, correct.
Okay, and then if they're in that window where they moved here after March 3rd, for example, then it would be just question ballot.
Question ballot.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we don't have any unfinished business listed on the agenda at this time. So we'll move on to new business. Claire.
And Jamie, feel free to jump in here. But after your last meeting, well, a couple of years ago, you asked to put a review of committees on each year in around January, February. So at your last meeting, we brought it up, we had a discussion, and then Jamie afterwards took a bunch of notes and put what you came up with into a plan. And so we have submitted that plan to Chair Christopher. I'm the last and the first names. This is confusing me.
It's
Chair
confusing.
Christopher. And so that is before you. So we're hoping you could all take a look at it. Since reorganization is coming up next month, and one of these changes would require a change of committee leadership, he wanted to present it to you now, get any feedback, and then wait till after reorganization to implement it. Because with a change in the Eagle River membership, there will probably be committee leader changes, and so wait till then to do it. But as you can see, we're proposing combining the health and public safety committees into a public health and safety committee, having the transportation committee now meet monthly, and maybe take on a little bit more pertaining to transportation infrastructure, taking the ethics and elections committee, which doesn't meet as regularly because it's really focused on those two things, and having it meet every month and become the quality municipal services. And that one would probably change the most, because then we would be inviting HR, IT, purchasing to participate in that. To take one step back, Chris charged us with looking up each committee in the municipality or each department in the municipality and making sure that they had an assembly committee that they matched with, so that every department could have an outlet to bring issues, concerns, ideas to the assembly. So that is what we started from. The enterprise and utilities would become infrastructure, enterprise and utilities, and they would add municipal public works to their purview. And then depending on our staffing capacity and your desires, at some point later, creating a quality of life committee that would include parks and recreation, the library, education issues, equal rights commission, office of equity and justice, and office of equal opportunity. And then everything else would stay the same. So that would keep the committee numbers the same, because we were merging some and realigning others. And so that would be a net, I think it's all net zero, even if we add the quality of life.
I think it
committee.
was net +1, but we were, we realized that you're voting on the short-term rentals, and that might be creating a new position for the clerk's office. So that would make the net equal. And then I also just want to say that I noticed just now that enterprise and utilities stays the same at the bottom, and that is not staying the same if they're adding infrastructure. I just noticed that.
So if I might, I didn't think about this before, but I would add, just so we have this as a record, one line to this goal line. And, so
Yeah.
under the action plan, and the goal is to ensure a streamlined committee process as possible. By streamlined, I mean not more committees, because the workload is a lot and the time commitments are a lot. But at the same time, provide every substantive administrative department a committee of record that they report to. So that's where we're working towards, is that all of the departments have a committee that they report to, so that every department head and their team feels like there's a committee where they can have be heard. And so we're not there yet, and it's like the mind pretzel of getting to the place where we can get it all in and do the challenge of keeping it as streamlined as possible. But the goal, again, is to be as streamlined as possible, but provide a venue for all department heads to have a committee of record. Go ahead, Mr. Bond, Daniel.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I like some of this. It's interesting with the health policy committee, for instance. We often aren't, our agendas aren't like super full, so we will adjourn early. We also, we meet a little too early in the morning sometimes, I think. But so I think there's a natural joining there with public safety, and I think we've also talked a lot about how public health really is sort of the third leg of the tripod of public safety. The transportation committee, on the other hand, though, I feel like it often feels rushed. So I like the idea of going monthly rather than quarterly, but I do, I guess, worry about, and maybe this is sort of up to each committee to decide their own workflow. But it seems like some of our committees are more report intensive. Like if we were going to have all these departments on here report, we would never get to the more discussion intensive actual items. So yeah, I guess that's one thing I'm thinking about is how do we balance getting standing reports that are helpful, they provide helpful information, with being able to really dig in, if there's a draft ordinance or a relevant topic that the committee really wants to take up.
So the answer to that is really simple. The implementation of the answer is always more challenging, and it's up to the committee leadership to determine the function of the committee with the membership. That's first. And then second, Felix is not here, but he's done a really great job, almost too great of a job, with the Housing and Homelessness Committee of having ad hoc meetings as needed when a matter comes up that is critical in nature and time sensitive. And also being a place where if, say, an ordinance is coming up that needs some vetting, but there isn't time for a work session, but the committee is meeting, making that committee available for that job. And so ultimately, the answer to that question is it comes down to the leadership, taking it on, owning it, and driving it like it's yours, because it is. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, couple comments. I support this. One note I'll say on legislative committee, that is one that I know we beefed up the role of. But I think I shared previously my intent with that is to be active during session, mostly as a forum for people to discuss issues as they come up, as we know it has this year, and then develop the legislative program in the fall. And I think because of the kind of process improvements we've made, we can tighten that up even further this fall, because we did a lot of heavy lifting this year. So that is one where it'll be active at certain times, and my intent is not to meet in the summer on that one, for example. So that one's a little bit unusual because it's tied to other levels of government. But the other comment I wanted to make, and I know we only have one of the two co-chairs, and he's unfortunately one of the co-chairs on his way out, but on CEDC, I just wanted to raise a question. I know traditionally that committee is met twice a month for an hour and a half. And so that is actually 3 times as much than the Budget and Finance Committee. And I'm not advocating for more time for Budget and Finance, but I just want to put in perspective, that is one of the most time intensive committees. I think it is really important. There's a lot of good work being done there. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up to say, I wonder if we could meet monthly on that one, or just
Right. And so,
knowing that I'm not the chair. Thanks.
yeah, no, and my intent with that committee will be Mr. Martinez will chair that going forward. And so he's not here to respond to that, but I think that it had historically been once a month, and then when the Title 21 major revisions were happening, it became bi-monthly and then sometimes weekly, and then it took a break, and then came the marijuana regulation, at which point it was every other week, and then it went to the marijuana licensing. After a break, it became every other week, because at every meeting there were like 5 and 10 marijuana licenses, and so it can slow down. It also could be a great place for detailed line item review of land use ordinances that, make people's heads explode. And so there's an opportunity. So, but the answer is the same. It's really a determination of the chair plus the membership, what they want to do, because the committee membership can direct the chair. The chair is not a dictator. The chair is the leader of the group, but the group is the one who decides, as in all of our business. And so I don't disagree. I've had to stop coming because it meets so frequently. And if it's the day after an assembly meeting, I don't do anything before 11 a.m. So, Claire.
To add to that, once this got approved, we would communicate with each department in the executive branch and let them know which committee they align with and what the meetings are and what to expect, but they wouldn't be attending they wouldn't all attend each meeting. probably when I worked for the library, we didn't have a committee that was attached. So just once a year, we requested a work session so we could give an annual report. And so different departments might choose to come to 1 or 2 meetings a year to give some kind of an update and then leave it at that. So it's not like you'd have to have reports from each department monthly.
Right. And that whole conversation about standing reports versus kind of ongoing content versus what's the theme of the day. The Public Safety Committee, as an example, just really evolved into this rote reporting process, the same reports every meeting. That was just a decision by the leadership to allow it to become that. There's no structural requirement that is what it is. And so it's your call. Make it so. And my methodology is not to try to lay from high down the rules and methods other than we follow the state law, open meetings, municipal code, open records, etc. Other than that, it's choose your own adventure. Karen?
And this stays the same list. There's AMATs down here, and it looks like it's in Transportation Committee. And so is
Right.
that not going to be part of the Transportation Committee?
So,
Just a little
just for
report out.
clarification. Yeah. So for clarification, the Transportation Committee will review the work of AMATs, right? But AMATs is a separate entity that exists with its own panel of voting members, with its own processes. And so we, as a body, don't effectively control AMATs, but we have members who participate. So AMATs is staying the same, but the Transportation Committee, like if you were to consider AMATs a department, which it isn't, but you could see it that way, will be reviewed by the membership at the Transportation Committee because there has historically been a disconnect. So the members at AMATs will do all of this work and they will get this process to a point where it's like, we all agree, we don't on AMATs. And then all the rest of the members are like, how the heck did this happen? We haven't been briefed on this. This isn't the assembly's position. And so it's a chance for the feedback loop on the AMATs process to come to the whole assembly. Yeah. That's the big money committee. Others? Anyone? All right. I don't think we have any more on that. And okay, so we'll take item A off the agenda for now. I'm going to actually do some of the more light stuff first. The seating chart conversation. I've had a member or two ask for us to reconsider the seating. I have a plan that would move a couple of members, but I don't think we should do it on Tuesday, only because one of the members that would get moved is his last meeting. And so I don't know that it's beneficial or great for him to move. And so the plan, though, is to move Ms. Bronga over to where Kevin sits now going forward. And then we'll have Mr. Littlefield seated over where Karen, you were for now. And then we'll see how that works. But then that will put you, I believe, in between Meg and Daniel. And so that's the plan, but I just don't know that it's really right to make Kevin move on this very last meeting. So go ahead, Ms. Bronga.
I don't think it's right to have him move then either.
Yeah.
But one thing that's really my biggest reason for wanting this is I'm seeing the disadvantage of having two people from the same district on the same side of the dais as George and I are. So that was kind of, so if we move Mr. Littlefield over, if he takes the spot where I was, then we have Scott and him on the same side. And I didn't realize that would even make a difference till we started having some of these scuffles up there that, you know, the first bite of the apple happens on this side of the dais. And then over here, we're just like, oh, dang, we can't get to it. They've already moved it.
So that maybe is a different issue than seating. And right, that I think you're talking about pulling items and moving items. And so that's a somewhat different issue. What we had discussed was having brand new members, too many new members, you know, the process of kind of making sure that there's enough experience on both sides. The issue of, you know, which side the chair starts on for pulling items, we can discuss that it's kind of a different conversation, I think. And so, at least than the one I spent the last like month thinking about what's the right moves. I had whole scenarios where I moved a whole bunch of people, and the least disruptive, I think, is that simple switch. But I will contemplate the conversation about dividing the members. I think it's actually, there's another variable there. Having two members from the same district on the same side is actually a benefit to that district. And I tried not to do that, generally speaking, but you can't work it out wholly because the chair is in the middle. And so somebody has to be on the same side. But anyhow, so that's the tentative plan at this point, would be for the first meeting in April to have you move over to the other side of the dais. And then I'll think some about a procedure for shifting the methodology. That's just as fair. I just have always done it. I start this way. It's just ritual. And so that part can change. So, Mr. Myers. Who? Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin. You there, Kevin? You're on mute if you're talking. Is Kevin still on the phone? Is he muted on our end? Nope. Okay, so I just texted him. Hopefully we worked this out. Okay, we'll come back, Kevin, when we figure out this IT issue. Maybe he has a family or something. Okay, so that one is nailed down for now. E, security training in the chamber. So just with some of the intensity of the members of public who've come in and the disruptions that we've had, it brought up for me kind of emotional baggage, if you will, PTSD of what it was like in 2020, 2021, the nature of some of the communications, and not just from the people who were there for a certain resolution. There have been some folks on land use in Girdwood, and just some really kind of scary rhetoric that has come through communications to members of the body. I've asked the chief of police to prepare, again, a training that we've done in the chamber over time that is kind of a security planning process for what happens if in the chamber when we're meeting. And we do these in small groups of the assembly, so no more than 3 members. We schedule them. Did we have a date that we were talking about? I think we kind of did, but I don't know that we affirmed it.
Yeah, I feel like that concept has come across my email. I don't think I
Okay.
remember what date.
So we're not quite ready for prime time on the date and time. But what we would generally do is schedule folks for a 30-minute block to come in and sit with a couple other members and be briefed by the CAP team and the chief of police on the various strategies for managing crisis in the chamber should it arise in the unlikely incident, and God forbid. And so that's in the planning process right now. The chief of police is prepared. We will pick a day. It's probably going to be an assembly meeting day. So, which is a bit of a pain in the butt for those that get scheduled 2.5 hours before the meeting starts. And it'll probably be a little bit earlier because we still need to leave that hour before the meeting for meeting prep. But so we'll be in half-an-hour chunks for the process to go on. So this is just to say we want to make sure everybody understands the assets and the liabilities and risks so that if something happens, we are prepared, because preparation is key. So that's coming. And then finally, before we do assembly member discussion, which is of pending business, which is always the best part of this meeting. And Mr. Cross, can you try to talk again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, you're there. Okay, great. So you were in the queue. We'll roll back to that previous topic.
Yeah, there was 2 things I was hoping to speak on. One, going way back regarding the CEDC. You were absolutely right, Chris, when we were dealing with the Title 21 issues. That was actually under Pete Peterson that we started doubling up those meetings. But now that we're through a majority of that workload, we've actually discussed going monthly. So I don't think Martinez is going to have any resistance for that. It's been light load the last couple meetings, so I think monthly is more than adequate. And the second item is regarding chair placement. You can put me wherever you want. I've moved around 3 times since I've been up here, and I enjoy sitting next to every one of you. So, I mean,
Yeah, I
none of the
think,
chairs are comfortable, so
Kevin,
just put me where you want. So,
I think Meg would feel heartbroken if she didn't get one more chance to sit next to you and elbow you a little bit. So, yeah, it's not just your choice alone. It's people want to spend the last chance with you because they've spent so much time with you. So it's not all about you, but it is about you. So anyhow,
thank you.
that's the reality there, is that we just don't want to disrupt the opportunities to say goodbye that folks have been planning on. So, yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, the other thing is, I kind of feel like you may think I just am dying to be on the other side.
No, that's
I
not
just
it.
wanted,
Yeah.
I'm fine where I am. I really love sitting by Zach and Felix, but I just thought
Well,
mixing it up a little bit would be good.
And
Just wanted-
the previous conversation on that topic really was about experienced members versus new members. And I didn't see it before, but after we talked, it's true. Like, if you just think about years of experience, is a much shorter years of experience on my right-hand side of the dais. And so it just seemed right and fair. And in discussions, the least disruptive, but at the same time, probably the most beneficial way is to will be all the help you're going to get is to sit between Meg and Daniel, because they're going to like, now's your chance. And so, because that's how we all learn. Yeah, that's how we all learn to do this work, is when the moment is there and you're thinking like somebody to tell you now's the time. And so this is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Mix it up. But I had a seating chart. I moved everything around a dozen times, and that was the best way I could think to do it. So, yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Okay, the next part of the conversation is part C. Part C, there is a discussion about enabling effective teamwork, and this comes in 2 flavors for me. I have a goal to help ensure all the members who are on the body are able to work within the team to get their needs met, to as much as possible get the floor when they want, how they want, when they want, that we can have these intense conversations that happen up on that dais, and that by the time we're done, we figured out how, as best as possible, to leave it on the floor. And then when tomorrow comes, it's the new day. So that's half of this conversation. And then the other half of this conversation is when 3 years ago, a new administration came in, there was a municipal manager that made by edict a position that all communications to the assembly must go through the manager's office, period. And that created a problem that we're still dealing with today. And the problem that created, even though the policy has been rescinded, and now assembly members can work with whomever they want, however they want, and the staff, their duty is to communicate with their team and make sure everybody's on a page, which is how it should be. Is, for example, and I'm going to be very specific on this, and it's the planning department. The scenario is that in 2021, we were told you must go through the manager in order to discuss anything with the planning department. And what that turned into then was that the planning department would only work on projects with members that the administration supported. Okay. So that meant we did not have staff support in planning for the purposes of anything we wanted to do unless the 8th floor agreed. And so the assembly's response was, okay, then we're just going to get our own people to help us do our own thing. And then we're going to come up with proposals that you can participate in the conversation or not, but we're not stopping our work because you want to be the filter. And so we effectively did. We stood up an entire legislative team. We stood up a legal counsel that is now doing more of the work that in the past the planning department might have done. Now, the negative scenario, the situation of we must all go through one person. Can you imagine 3,000 people filtering or 2,000 employees filtering through one desk, one email to all of us? How this is broken. Well, we did set that up. And now we have a disconnect between our planning team and the legislative branch. because we then just started taking it up on ourselves. And so one of my missions is, and this is, I'm not picking on planning. Some of it's them and some of it's us. It was for us because of need. We needed to do this because our legislative function could not be constrained by one person. That I am hoping to reconstruct working relationships with the staff in a manner that we feel comfortable going to them to draft, vet, and implement projects for us, which will hopefully take some burden off of our legal team and our legislative team. Perfect. That's a theme. So that's my goal, and to have a conversation about how to achieve that goal. So I spent already 5 minutes out of 20 talking about this. So I don't know where we want to start. I don't have a structured conversation on the topic of how we plan to work together and leave it on the table and be able to have robust bare knuckle conversations on the dais and still work, and then the other side. So let's just pick one or the other. Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can offer a couple examples that have been working well is our work on the Budget and Finance Committee with the OMB director. I mean, obviously we have differences there, but we've been able to sit down and kind of have constructive conversations and then ask questions, and then, kind of say, this is our intent, and then working through that. So I think there are some examples where it's been working, which is helpful. And then I guess I'll also say I was thinking back to the bike equity ordinance back in last July. We got comments from the traffic engineer, and there weren't all things that maybe he personally supported or that were things that the administration was endorsing. But we framed it as what are the impacts of this, or just kind of getting feedback, impacts and analysis. So those are just a couple examples, I think, of where there can be healthy tension, but we still, can ask questions. And then we made changes as a result of that too. So it can be productive.
Another example is for the past 2.5 years, the Assembly has drafted its own substitute budget because we didn't get any collaboration from the budget team. They give us what they wanted, and then we said, hey, we want these things added. Dead air. And so in the end, we came up with our own substitute version. And ideally, in the past, even when there were difficult conversations or disagreements between the branches, the administration would draft a substitute version that did its very best to incorporate the drive and goals of the legislative branch to get a product that is mutually agreeable. And so there are other departments where this conversation is also germane. I just picked planning because it's the easy one for me to point to. Anyone have thoughts? So I guess we're starting on the conversation of interbranch communications between the branches. Any thoughts on how we make this work? Karen?
Well, I had a conversation with Ann Helzer about, she feels like there's this real tension in legal. And I kind of wondered, is there any reason that legal couldn't all be on the same floor? And they're all part of a team, different sections of, that's a hard no.
Yeah, so I can answer that.
Okay.
So our legal department is our legal department. And if you go way back to the Charter Commission conversation, they contemplated the Assembly may need to set up its own legal department because the interests of the Assembly will at times be different than the interests of the administration. And so, yeah, Anne would love it if our attorneys worked for her. I would guess that, but
Not worked for her, but we just you enter you go to the 7th floor, which is prestigious, 7 versus 2, maybe, it just puts them on the same floor, not the same working for her or anything. But
yeah,
never
so
mind.
that's an interesting conversation. But so yes, there are some challenges between our department and the administration on the question of legal services. It plays out in a number of ways. So it's an interesting point. So the idea of moving people around. Other thoughts? Kevin, or not
Hey,
Kevin.
Chris.
Yeah, Randy, I'm sorry, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
So one thing that might help is we all have key contacts within each department, is maybe putting together a simple phone list. For example, Public Works or Planning and Zoning.
who we can contact for certain things, and not an extensive or exhaustive list, but just the key, the Dave Whitfields, the Lance Wilbers.
That's a great
Because
idea.
I think that's we all fall in that where we don't copy Kent because we know we don't need to copy Kent. It's a waste of his time. So
So like a leadership list.
and then and then the other thing on the how we work together in the meetings, I will say I've learned from Meg the ability to you can have that heated discussion and you lost the vote, you won the vote, who cares, whatever, you're on to the next item, and she can look at you sternly with one breath for the previous item and then smile at you on the next one. So
True.
it's a good skill to have, and don't take it personal.
Yeah, it's a very important skill to build, is that piece. Yeah, I can remember, Meg isn't here, maybe I'll pick on her a little bit. At one point, she literally screamed at me really loud and left the meeting. And an hour later, we were having coffee and it was all good. But it was very personal and painful when that happens. So, and she and I are proof that we can disagree and get along. Daniel, do you have any thoughts? I saw those eyes.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that the planning department is top of mind for you, because it's also top of mind for me. And, Karen brought up Ann Helzer and, Department of Law. I think, I am feeling this tension right now where, the home initiative, folks are probably aware that the planning department released their staff report. So the co-sponsors are in the process of working on our findings and our response and our interpretation to that document. And so I think there's another example of where there is disagreement, or at least difference of interpretation between the branches, or at least between a department and policymakers. One thing I think that was disappointing to myself and my co-sponsors was the memo that Department of Law sent out about a rezoning process. And that, I think, was from a newer attorney. It's great that we have new attorneys. We need attorneys. If you're an attorney and you're listening and you want to come work for the municipality, we would be happy to have you. But there were a couple things in that memo. Number one, I think Assembly Council is going to respond with their interpretation of code and what a rezoning process looks like and what can sort of put those things in motion. So there's that. But it was the disappointing part, I think, was that was sent to all of our colleagues, not just to the co-sponsors. And the way that comes across is that it was a tactic to sort of cast doubt on our legislation that we've been working on. And so if we're talking about communication with departments, whether that's Department of Law or the planning department, I think maybe having a conversation about how we can respect the drafting process, because in the drafting process, that's when you want to be spitballing ideas and you're working on something that's imperfect, right? And we along the way, the co-sponsors have been asking for feedback from the planning department and input on this legislation. And I think, that's happening maybe through gritted teeth. I don't know, but it's happening. So I guess that would be maybe a conversation that we can have with department heads, is what could a really functional drafting process look like? And then let's see what else. I think that's probably my comments for now. Thanks.
Yeah, so you raise a very interesting point. On the administrative side, they have effectively a deliberative process privilege and they would never violate it. But it appears in some ways they're not respecting the same deliberative process with members of the body as we go through the process. In fact, being willing to share communications with everybody before the item is ready. So that's an interesting discussion. Go ahead.
So my other thought that I almost lost track of was, I'm also getting a lot of feedback from members of the public sort of expressing frustration about the fact that, the assembly will often move last minute substitute versions or amendments. And I think that there's a misunderstanding of our legislative process that the public has. They're frustrated by something that they maybe haven't heard before, but that's part of the public process. We put an ordinance out there, and then we have public hearings. People can give comments at committee meetings. They can give comments at our regular meetings. If it's a planning related issue, they can often give comments at the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings as well. So they're all along the way, we create opportunities for public engagement, public feedback. And then it is the prerogative of the policymakers to move amendments. And often those amendments are in response to feedback that we've received from departments or the public. And so I think as a policymaking body, we do need to maybe be assertive about our right to do that, but also help educate the public that this is the iterative nature of policymaking, that things evolve along the way. And there's also instances where an ordinance comes forward, and then a colleague could bring a substitute version forward, or they can make an amendment because they maybe like XYZ, but not ABC. So just helping the public understand, I think, especially in some of these more controversial zoning related or housing related projects that we're working on, that's how the sausage is made. And it's all part of a robust public process.
So far in there, I see two areas of development. One is drafting some form of agreement between department heads individually or as a whole, I don't know, that would kind of outline how our expectations and goals in drafting projects and hear from them so their input is in. And so we come to some mutual agreement on methods for drafting, in particular privileges and who should be involved and when communications should happen. And this has gone up to the highest levels. I mean, there was a communication from the municipal attorney effectively that I believe violated attorney-client privilege because it took a draft item and spoke to all members. And that's never good. And so coming up with that agreement, that's one. And that might be run through, I hate to say it, guys, legal. And then one is kind of a public process outline description, like some way to a workflow. This is how it works. And because I, for one, will always say any member, as much as I may not like it, has a right to move an amendment, period, full stop, or a substitute version at any time. That's your right. Far be it from me to take it away, or a member of the public who's disgruntled with the public process to take it away. But instead, and this I think falls into the Legislative Services Department, beginning a process of creating some public communications on here is the workflow. And then that can be vetted by us. Then it can be sent out even for comment to certain community organizations if we want to or not. That way, whatever documents come out of that work fine. And I think in some ways this builds on John Weddleton's Assembly 101 videos and that work that was done. And so one is internal looking. One is again, agreements with departments on the development of material. One is communicating to the public. So are there other thoughts on how we might do that, Karen?
The idea Randy had of, who is the go-to for
Yeah.
different places. It'd be really cool if it could be like have a picture of the person by the name. Because a lot of times I get into the big settings and I don't recognize people. And for someone new, it would be really helpful. I know we've had a lot of changes of staff, so that'd be a working document,
project,
but
yeah.
it'd be cool.
Project. Yeah, well, except if they don't last a year. And I have had so many names and faces in my brain anymore. It's the opposite. It's not that I'm new. It's that I'm just saturated and I can't even tell who they are anymore. I think that's great. So that's a third project, the contact sheet. And I actually think that's a clerk project, if I'm not mistaken, because the clerk is able to understand who the department heads are. And
What was the project?
it's okay. It's developing a department head contact sheet for members to utilize to be able to know who to engage with on key questions. The only difference is there was an ask maybe for photographs so that we can know who we're talking to. But I think that one falls with the clerk because the clerk kind of knows, engages. Anna?
A couple thoughts. I think in terms of workload, I think that should also be on the admin. Like they need to tell us who their staff are. So I agree that it's clerk, but what you're describing is basically who on the executive branch side are we supposed to talk to about XYZ. So I think also I'm just trying to put some work back on
Right.
them too.
And I wasn't expecting the clerk to go out and look for that. I actually think that's a straight up job of the chief of staff to draft the first, but I think the place where it lives is probably the clerk's office, just because the clerk engages with them all and does on base and approvals and all of that work. And so we know who is responsible because we have the workflow. So you're right, though. I think it's a Mario project. Surprise. It's not me to direct him, but that's who we're going to ask.
And then a couple other pieces of feedback. I like those project ideas. I think that would be useful. I actually did start a contact sheet. My aide is probably partway through it, and then I didn't get back to it. So I can share what I have because the idea was to make that available to other people. A couple other thoughts, though. I think one thing, these are more along the lines of ideas to socialize and kind of gaps in public understanding that I've seen. One of them is, and I've seen this from many different sources, kind of across the spectrum, is characterizing ideas from assembly members as the assembly, right? And I know, and we've all been on either end of that, right? Where it was our project. And so we do take responsibility for that, right? And, home initiative is on my mind for sure. But there's other things where it's other people's projects and it doesn't, we may or may not support it, but I think there's this misunderstanding of the public and there's this creation of the assembly as this monolith, right? And that anything that's being proposed by individuals, it's like saying one House member or one Senate member introduced a bill and all of a sudden the legislature is, so it's an absurd premise on its face, but I think it just is what's out there. And so I think in our materials, we don't necessarily need to go into depth on that, but I think just be aware that that's a big misunderstanding. And I think that characterizing that things are brought by assembly sponsors, because I think I don't see that level of misunderstanding about the state legislature or certainly about Congress. So I think that's one of them. And then the other one I think is on the process. I think that's really great. I think having more, there's just a very low level of public understanding about how we work, what the city does, who does what, how our processes work. And I've seen that for many years, having been on the outside and now on the inside. But another thought just to put out for people is there's the general public helping people get engaged. And then there's when you get folks like experienced community council people, advocate organizations, other folks who really are engaging in a level of strategy that is above and beyond the kind of, I want to comment on one specific issue. It's not our job to teach people how to do that, but I think just to put that out there that there's different levels. And so really once you start getting into kind of organizing an advocacy level as a member of the public, I think it is someone's responsibility and really, I'm happy to help with that. I think others are too, on kind of what the strategy looks like, right? Like how you utilize these systems to advance your goals, whatever those are. And so I think I just want to put out there that those are two different levels because there's kind of the basic, here's our process. And I'm not saying that we put out an organizing 101 kind of thing because that's not our role either, but just to socialize that idea. That's also a conversation. So if you are working with advocates, helping them understand how our process works at a deeper level than just kind of here's how you submit a public comment, I think that really would benefit this community because I've seen a lot of kind of uneven understanding of that over the years.
Scott and then Karen.
I'm glad you brought that up, Anna. And maybe it's my ignorance or lack of experience on this body, but a couple of questions I've had is a tracking system to track assembly actions, because a lot of times we move things to other meetings, then people show up and they want to testify and then they don't know which meeting it's going to be on. It's going to have an S version come forward. Can you testify on that? So, and like I said, maybe it's just my ignorance. I don't know if there's a tracking system for assembly actions or if that's something that we could come up with for the public, essentially.
Yeah, I am not sure the answer to that. I mean, we have an internal tracking system. If an item is moved to an agenda in four meetings from now, it gets back on the agenda. The portal doesn't get updated until there's a formal action, right? There's an introduction. So if there's a postponement, the portal doesn't say that until after. Is that correct? Yeah, and so the portal isn't an effective tool. So I'll chew on that a little bit, just maybe write a note. Yeah, please, go ahead.
I was going to say the newsletter is a great resource. We cover a lot of ground in the newsletter, but you still take up a lot of business that isn't captured in the newsletter through kind of the priorities of the work plan. So I could see the need for maybe something else. And I think this is a really good example of how the clerk's office has done a lot of work over the years to make information available to the public. Legislative services have developed and made information available to the public. So I love hearing that the public's standard or expectation for what they can understand about the business that you do is continuing, like the bar keeps getting higher and higher. And so I just want to acknowledge that pattern that we, all of us exist to kind of serve a function, but that the need is always there and it's kind of limitless. So at some point, we also need to understand, like, going back to the team capacity thing, the limitations of our staff capacity. For example, internally, the clerk's office has a what's called an action agenda that the minutes clerk is taking. So as you take actions on each of those agenda items, there is a tracker, but it takes a couple days for that to then be available to legislative services staff and other municipal staff. And so not to say that there isn't a mechanism there, but like it's also a little bit of expectation setting around how quickly as a team we can turn that around.
Yeah, and I'll just put that on the hopper that we'll talk about how that might work because it's a good question. And it is in following with the process we've been working on to make sure the public understands as much as possible what's happened. And it's interesting to think of a section of the agenda that could be items that were postponed, right, to a date certain, right? It could be something that we add into our reporting, our newslettering, if there's an action agenda and it said these items, but then we would have to benchmark which items are significant enough to warrant that, because some things that are just postponed because we need to get an A version because the name was spelled wrong or, the date was wrong, that doesn't really matter. It's more like, well, STRs were postponed to this date and time. Jamie.
The portal does have that information. So AO 2023-110S1 was postponed to 3/19, and it does state that in the portal.
Okay, so the record is updated. That's good. So
Yeah, so we update them in the next day or so as we're doing stamping all of the things and doing the things. So again, it might take a day or three, but it is reading that index every night and uploading it the next day.
once it's updated. Okay, Claire.
But as I understand it, the documents aren't there. So you have to go see what meeting date it was attached to and then go back to the meeting calendar.
And you still may not see the updated S version. that
You're
was
not
laid on
going
the
to see
table.
anything
Yeah.
amended.
Yeah.
Right.
I
and
guess
we aren't going to get to that level because it's so many moving parts at this time.
because we're bound by the products we're using of
Right.
on base and YouTube and all of that stuff. But that is why I just want to put a plug in for the newsletter. That is why we're so proud of the newsletter, is that is the one place we are trying to track that. And now that we've been doing it for a couple of years, we have more of the items that we know are like coming up, because before it would be a little bit of a surprise for us when we see it on the agenda.
Mystery.
And now we're better about tracking it. So I think for now, have people sign up for the newsletter and just know that civic education is a huge part of legislative services. And we're always trying to improve this and taking your ideas.
And if a substitute version, for example, comes up and is introduced and is laid on the table and it gets emailed out to all members as soon as it's entered into the record. And so we as members have those records to share if a specific individual is asking for specific information. So we do have the tools individually to do that. But we'll talk about that some more. It's good. Yep.
Conversation. Having worked on the administrative side for most of my career at the municipality, I have to put a little plug in with them. I know that there was a lot of friction between the two branches for a while, but a lot of that's gone. But we still might be carrying that old baggage with us. And so I think just to really respect their professionalism. And if you have an idea, maybe take it to them in very big concept form first before you have some legislation written. And you might disagree and then say, fine, I've gotten your professional opinion. I disagree. I'm still going to go for it. But I think maybe that's where some of the friction has come to, of just skipping skipping them altogether.
It's a system that we set up, right? We created a system that avoided all of that because it was useless to us, right? And so it's like figuring out how to breach that and make a system that engages with the administration on projects within their purview at the earliest time possible. Some things, some of it, you're playing poker. I'm not showing you what I'm working on because it's not yet time for this to be revealed. That is a factor of legislative drafting and legislation and being a legislator. But insofar as it is possible, figuring out a way to bring in the right teams from the administration as early as possible is best. I had a pretty big fight with the health department last week on animal care and control, or 2 weeks ago, and they just decided not to come because I said that I think that their plan is cruel. And so I suffer this. I see it and I suffer it too because I've spent so long in the space where it was a fight. And so the hope is I can lead to a place by my own actions and by these conversations where we eliminate the need for unnecessary fights and instead build bridges where possible as early as possible. That's kind of the homily of this story, is as much as possible, let's try. And between us, I'll finish just by saying what was interesting and why I decided I wanted to put this conversation on the agenda, the first half, the inter-conversation of members, was after that very abrupt motion to postpone and call the question, there were a lot of feelings, and the meeting ended in tension. And that's the first time in a long time that dynamic had happened on our body. And I pride myself on stewarding a body that can get through it by the end of the night. And then the next meeting, though, what was so instructive is we went through the process. It didn't end where anybody really wanted it to end, except for me. In the end, where it ended was there was a sense of comity between the members at the end of the night. Nobody left in a rage. Nobody left feeling burned.
Conflict resolution.
Right. Conflict resolution being the term and it's more than conflict resolution. It's like an engaging process. Everybody's heard, which is generally the goal. So my hope of bringing this up is talking about it, because the more we engage and are frank with ourselves about how those dynamics work, the next time maybe it will be easier at the end of the night to let it go at the end of the night. So when we come in the next time, it's fresh and we're all ready to go on the issues of the day. That's the homily there. Like, we learn as we go. So anyhow, then the last item on the agenda, this might be a kind of a short meeting. The next item is assembly member discussion on pending business or updates. Well, before you do that, the ombudsman is here. Daryl, did you have anything you wanted to bring up? Or are you just hanging out? Welcome. Okay, I just want to make sure, since you're here, that we heard from you. Then the last item on the table is our opportunity to go around the room. And Mark, for your benefit, we are bound by open meetings rules that we can only talk about projects with fewer than 4 members, so 3 members or less on a project, unless we're in an open meeting, right? And that becomes really tricky to manage when you're dealing with complex projects and you have constituent issues and all of the things going on in every direction. And so we have created this as an opportunity where we are in an open session, so you can talk about whatever you want relating to work that you're working on and provide members the benefit of understanding. Many of the purposes include, so we don't have 2 or 3 members working separately on the same item, spending all that time when they could be working together and come up with a unified product. Or another reason is that you are able to socialize an idea you're working on early in the process. So as the steps go along and the project becomes material, and then it is before the members, it's not cold, because one thing you'll learn about this work, last minute changes often fail by the time you get to the floor and an ordinance is up and it's a very complex issue and somebody's like, I want to do this whole other thing. It might be a great idea, but the members may not understand it and are unlikely to support it. That's just mathematically over time. That's how that works. No is an easier answer when you don't understand. So this is an opportunity to talk about those issues that might be coming forward. And again, back to the poker metaphor, it's also a time not to talk about stuff that you don't think is ready for prime time. And so that's a member's opportunity. So this is our chance to go around and kind of put things on the table. So Karen.
I was going to say one more thing, and I'm not trying to add anything else to your stack of items, but I've been really struck by the super hostile emails that I'm never going to vote for you again and blah, 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 blah. And I was thinking about your Assembly 101 and somehow effective communication with leadership, another series, like how to get your assembly members on board kind of thing. Effective communication skills.
Right. And in fact, I think that's one of the
Is-
things that
is
was
that one of them?
requested. Yeah, like how can members of what is the process so that members can effectively work with us? And that's what Weddleton's 101 was. This item is so hot, right, that it's really wild. Someone call you all those names and then think whatever they're going to do is going to
It's going
move
to
you
make
to be in their path. And so, but to the previous point, I would say, I just shared with Daniel over the weekend, somebody shared a book with me by an author named Ichiro Kishimi. It's called The Courage to be Disliked. And some part of this job is making hard decisions that are going to have people that are not going to like you. And the only skills that they've learned in the modern era of social media is to be rude. And sometimes it's just, we face that, and it's hard. So, but yes, I think that is an important piece, because there was a member of that group and his mom actually who both said the same question: how do we protest effectively? Right. And that's a great question. And protest is different than advocate, but it's how do we do this effectively? And I would lean heavily on the 101. Any other projects?
So what I was going to say is I talked before about wanting to put a restriction on diet pills and muscle building supplements to 16 and under. And Jennifer did some digging, and there hasn't been a city that's been successful. So it's going to be a state kind of lift if we ever went there. But she suggested possibly a media campaign through the health department. And I approached Kim Rash about possibly doing that. The other thing that I was interested in working in, I haven't got any updates, but the pedestrian that is in a crosswalk getting hit and killed, and there's a $100 ticket that comes with that. So upping the fine for someone who's legitimately in a crosswalk and is struck. The other thing that I really am passionate about, but haven't done a darn thing with, is someone sent me some video footage of a person at the National Archives site with one of Lowe's carts full of something like 6 sheets of plywood, walking away from the store, and they're telling him to stop, but then he just keeps going. So the shoplifting, I talked to Chief Curl about it, and he's like, we really can't do anything because there's a no chase policy. But I know there are cities that are upping the game. The second time you're caught shoplifting, there are some pretty serious consequences. So I was going to dig into that a bit. And that's it.
I'll just note, in DC, we were walking on an evening walk through a neighborhood, and the city has actually constructed signs that they put up at the site where someone is killed in traffic. And it's an actual public sign that says at this site, this time somebody was killed in a pedestrian automobile accident. That's not, of course, yeah, it was certainly made you want to not walk on that street. It was, anyhow, so it's a good area to work. And there was another article published on that subject today, so it's topical. Scott.
I'll go back to Karen's question. I would just say delete your social media. It's enlightening.
Yeah.
I haven't missed it at all.
Your attorneys agree with you.
It's, I think I save a lot of time not scrolling on Facebook anymore. Okay, Zach and I are working on an ordinance to provide a tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and EMS so that they have, it's more symbolic. I mean, really, there's not much fiscal note attached to it, but to give, I guess, some appreciation for the time they spend. I know that Chugiak Rural Fire Department and Zach's got the similar setup down in in Girdwood, they spend a lot of time volunteering, hundreds, thousands of hours every month. So that will hopefully, with the help of Mr. Hurt down there, be ready to bring to the body momentarily.
So it's allowed under state law?
Yeah, it's already happened in Fairbanks and on the Kenai.
So anyone can ask questions of members as well. This is a time to ask questions on projects. So I have a question on that. There's a broader group that comes to mind, police, fire, and teachers. Is that something that's allowed, or is this restricted only to volunteers?
So that particular statute specifies volunteer firefighters and emergency medical personnel, and it's limited to those. I can look and see if there's any other sort of provision that.
So you said volunteer firefighters and emergency professionals. Does that mean volunteer firefighters and volunteer emergency professionals?
Yeah,
or,
it's meant to be for people who provide.
Sounds like a great project. Anything else? All right, Mr. Bond.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I think, okay, Allie's got a graphic she's going to put up. As folks know, on Tuesday night, scheduled to come back before us is my proposal to prohibit right turns on red lights in the central business district, so downtown. I have personally received a lot of positive feedback about that. And of course, just like anything else, a couple folks questioning it or not in support of it. But I want, if Allie, just the map, if you could put that up, just so I want to just socialize this idea. Actually, member Zolotel has expressed interest to me in being a part of that conversation and maybe being a little bit more expansive with that ordinance. So I'm going to move to postpone it on Tuesday. And so this is from our Vision Zero plan. It's the mapped high injury network. And so I think there's pros and cons, with both ideas. So one idea could be we keep it confined to downtown. And I think there's certain arguments for that, right? Downtown is sort of where you want it to be the most pedestrian friendly. It's illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk downtown, but we don't have protected bike lanes downtown. And can people sort of readily understand, okay, I'm downtown, I shouldn't be turning right, turn on red? Or should the ordinance be a little bit more motivated by our adopted plans that we have and where injuries are more likely to happen? So in our Vision Zero plan, this is the mapped high injury network. So an alternate idea that we could pursue if folks were interested in a substitute version would be to prohibit right turns on red where they're mapped on the high injury network. And then that would capture not only certain streets in downtown, like 5th and 6th, right? And we've been having a lot of conversations about slowing down traffic on 5th and 6th and regaining local control. But would also capture areas of Midtown and East Anchorage that are heavily trafficked. So just something that I guess I would want to throw out there and get folks thinking about, and maybe in the future, after we postpone it on Tuesday, we can have a work session and flesh out those ideas a little bit more. So that's all I got for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks. So that, as you know, he said a motion to postpone is coming. So that's good to hear. Save us a little time. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I have miscellaneous updates. So one for legislative committee, I'm going to Juneau again on Monday, March 25th, coming back on Tuesday to do a little bit of targeted advocacy. And then I'll also note that it's budget season. So the revenue forecast came out. They are, it looks like it was a little better than expected, meaning there's going to be a tiny bit more money. So there's going to be a lot of competition for that, obviously. So again, encouraging all members to speak with your representatives on legislative priorities. We are speaking on our citywide ones. We have the whole list in the back. I'm not putting myself in the position of saying that, West Anchorage projects are better or any of that. So just, talk to your folks because that's who gets those things in the budget. On the ACE Fund and Accountability Board, that is the Marijuana Tax Early Childhood Board. Claire mentioned that we're working with staff on that one. So public engagement is going really great. This is just a very brief update. I'm happy to talk more, or actually maybe talk to staff about that. So we're going to be winding that down. I believe we'll get kind of a report back on that at some point where we're going to schedule a work session. I don't think that's been scheduled yet. And then we've also kind of identified parallel to so this is creation of the Accountability Board, who will make an advisory recommendations on where to spend the ACE Fund money, the Marijuana Tax for Early Childhood. But separate from that, but related in topic is discussion about potential changes to the child care licensing code in the muni. So I know there's been some kind of specific things identified that could be changed. I'm not characterizing those as one big project, partly because I want to make sure other people have an opportunity to work on that, and because they're going to be separated in terms of timeline. But just to mention, that's out there. I know Mr. Solt has brought some forward, there's a lot of kind of work to be done there. And then we will be working on creating the initial draft ordinance to formulate that board. So what it looks like, the seats, all of that stuff. So that'll be coming forward later this spring. As I said, the intent is to have a work session so that we can work through it. We have our implementation team, which has assembly members, school board, a lot of different organizations, AHD, a lot of stakeholders. So that group will continue to work and then bring that forward to the assembly. And then I will note also, we will need a third member after April 1st. So we have not made that decision, but I just wanted to put it out there. So this is the project that currently Cameron Perez Verdia, myself, and Kevin Cross are working on. Because Kevin is leaving the body, that leaves an opportunity for a new member to jump on, I believe, after April 1st, just to keep it clean. And that's sort of what happened with me and Austin Quinn Davidson, who was a big advocate for this project, but of course left, and I happened to be the one to pick it up. So just to say, if you're interested, I think the best thing to do would be to talk to Jennifer Vanek-Clausen, or to actually reach out to Austin, because as a private person now, she's working as a contractor on that work, so she can kind of catch you up if you want to get information about that, and is of course not subject to the OMA. So just to put that out there, that's something that we hope to figure out. And then my ask is really there's going to be a fair amount of work. It's going to be during first quarter budget revisions and other stuff that I'm actively involved in. So whoever does sign on, I would really appreciate you being an active member and picking up some of the work. So that would be great. And then lastly, on home, we talked about it a little bit. You all are aware that it's moving. So our public meeting our planning and zoning public hearing and meeting is Monday, March 18th. So a week from Monday, there's a work session starting at 5:30, and then the actual meeting and public hearing at 6:30. So if you know folks who want to testify, they can't testify until 6:30, but they're welcome to watch that first hour. And then just to note as well, we are actively scheduling meetings with community councils, community groups. We've reached out to a lot of folks basically through the end of May or even early June. And maybe beyond that as well. So if you have community councils who would like a briefing on it, or you just know other groups who would like to know more about it, please put them in touch with the sponsors, because we can certainly do that. We're doing our roadshow, and then also happy to connect with folks. Anybody who wants to talk about it, please send them to the sponsors. And I believe that's it for now. Thank you. Sorry, I had one more thing. This is not a project, but I highly recommend this book. Homelessness is a housing problem. It's pretty wonky. It's an economist, so just FYI. There's a lot of talk about inelasticity of supply, but it's a really great book. I actually bought this last year with my personal budget, with the intent that any other assembly member or staff or whoever could read it. So it'll sit in my office, but I'm happy to lend it out, and it's a community resource at this point. So I really recommend this book. It is Homelessness is a Housing Problem: How Structural Factors Explain U.S. Patterns. And then it's by Greg Colburn and Clayton Page Aldrin. So just heads up.
Mr. Salt.
Okay, so Ann already mentioned the daycare piece they're working on, also working with planning and zoning on an AO to allow pallet shelters or boss cubes in Title 21-23. And then bringing forward another AO to affix 30 minutes of public testimony to the beginning of the meeting. See how that goes. Continuing to work with the AEDC on the sales tax initiative, which will probably come under a different name here shortly. And then also sponsoring a resolution in support of Representative Sarah Vance's House Bill 254, which is requiring increased security measures to prevent those under 18 from accessing online porn sites. And that's about it in the foreseeable future.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Cross. We can't hear you if you're talking.
I'm not currently
There you
looking
are.
at anything.
There you are.
Thank you.
What's that? Okay, we're going to move on to Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, nothing to add right now.
All right, thank you. So I also don't have much by way of specific projects. But I will say that Tuesday we have a veto override that will be on the agenda. There are some discussions about making sure assembly members are able to help community councils be prepared for their CIP and CIB process that's coming forward. We've heard from Ms. Lechner the timelines, and none of that's changed, even though I've had a discussion for a while about moving those timelines, maybe with Matthew or Matt, our new financial analyst on board, we can have a discussion about that policy. And get that really underway. And then I wanted to brief members on our trip to DC, kind of what happened just when we were there yesterday, in particular, our visit with HUD. Those of you who've been involved with us for a long time remember last year, the HUD secretary came and did a visit and made some commitments. And while we were in DC, the HUD secretary announced her resignation. And so as always, the way it works in public policy, there's a churn. And but we did happen to have a meeting with a few of the deputy secretaries of HUD yesterday. It was quite a panel of folks in the room. We had their data person, we had their policy person, we had their homelessness person, we had their financial person, and HUD did what you would expect them to do when they're working on a rulemaking process. We can't really tell you anything, but you can tell us what you think. Because if there is a solicitation coming out or a major rule change, they have rules that they cannot violate internally that communicate what they're working on until it's published for comment. And so, but we were able to provide a substantive set of comments. And I think the thing that I would like you all to understand the most is that we had chief staff members from each of our congressional delegation offices who attended with us. And in fact, Congresswoman Peltola joined the meeting. And I think that we blew HUD's mind in the context of how unified Alaska is on this question. And in fact, Peltola turned the screw on them, and it was quite amazing to see. She said, I want a weekly or bi-weekly meeting with this group, with assembly members in my office, congressional delegation, to talk about the barriers, because HUD talked about all the barriers to getting some fixes to what we need. And so the congresswoman's office is working with Larry Burton, who is chief of staff for Senator Sullivan, and we're going to really start to raise the bar on the conversation. I don't know that HUD's leadership had seen an entire delegation show up, and they definitely said, you guys are punching above your class, clearly. And so I want to report that there was a setback, but at the same time, I'm optimistic because the pressure that's coming from our delegation is like HUD hasn't seen before. And so we're going to keep riding that to get to the point where they start to put forward their notice of change. They did direct us to a proposed policy change. This might be something Jennifer can help us with. In 2016, 2017, HUD put out a series of potential changes for public comment that were never adopted, but they directed us to that to look at what they're proposing again for the rulemaking process. And so if we could maybe begin some work on that so we can be educated on what those changes were, then we'll be able to have a more thoughtful conversation. But I will end where I started. It was amazing to see our delegation, and I'm confident through the transition that we're going to continue to be heard because of it. So our trip was a high success on that account. So I don't have anything else. Does anyone else have any? Well, Mark, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself, welcome yourself, introduce yourself, tell us what you want to work on. Can you turn the microphone on?
Yeah, I got to turn that on. I got to remember, push the button. I've seen it a lot of times. I did have something back on C when you were talking about teamwork, and I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread that this assembly is going to meet with the directors. It would be really great. However, if we could impress on the directors that conversation goes down, filters down through the ranks, because I was in the ranks and I never understood what my director was trying to tell me. it's not uncommon. We get directions from the director and they're imposed by the administration and the assembly, but we don't know why. And it's really nice if the workforce understood and had a good team working environment. Basically, the pyramid down, we're the top of the pyramid. If everybody down below us knew what we was doing, it would be great. We'd have a really good working relationship with the 2,500 or 3,000 employees that we do have.
So I'll interrupt you there
Okay.
and say that we each bring our own assets to the body, and we are a 12-member body that speaks as one. And so everybody's experience adds value to what we do. And I'm super glad you're coming, because on the topic of how we effectively work with the administration, you are, other than Claire, maybe the only one who has spent some time working in the administration, and you have 30 years of experience. And so, beware of being voluntold, because your skills and experience are going to fill a need that is very clear.
Well, I hope so. That's what I come into this, and I'm being honored to work with all of you folks. It's going to be an experience, and I look forward to it. I really do. I hope I can contribute, and I really want to. So moving forward.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit of your background, that little intro.
Okay, well, I joined the Air Force straight out of high school and was in Montana, and I moved up to Anchorage, Alaska in 1982. Fell in love with the country, fell in love with the state. Moved out to Eagle River in 1984, built my first home, retired from the military, built my second home, went to work for the municipality I didn't even get a break from the military. I was still on terminal leave, and I went to work for the municipality of Anchorage. So I was a street maintenance operator for several years, actually worked down in the CBD in the 95, 96 snowstorm. I don't think I got out of the CBD for almost 6.5 months. We finally got out of the CBD. Worked there for several years, went to work for Solid Waste Services as an operator out there. Came back to street maintenance as a supervisor in 2000. And in 2010, I moved out to Eagle River as the superintendent of roads out there. I spent the last 13 years running road maintenance out there, and decided it was time for bigger and better things. And if Representative Cross and Member Cross hadn't retired, I'd probably still be retired. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity, and I'm actually excited about it.
We're glad to have you coming on board. All right. Anyone else on the members? Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard? Anyone on the phone? No one on the phone? Okay, I don't see anyone who wishes to be heard, so we are to some people's favorite part of the agenda, number 7. We are adjourned.
Very quick. So I'm sending 2 follow-ups to you and me and staff, and then one of them on the board on my email. The other one, I'm just gonna do that. And then the other one's
Yeah, no, that's important. That's important. And we need Jennifer on that staff from this team. She should write her own list.
Yeah. Because, yeah, she did